Alright folks, let's talk about something a lot of people are confused about. Why on earth does the United States keep circling around Iran like it's the last slice of pizza at a party? Seriously, Washington knows perfectly well that messing with Iran could turn into a geopolitical nightmare. If things go wrong, the United States could get dragged into a bottomless mess in the Middle East. And yet, they still keep pushing. So the real question is, why risk it? Simple. Because Iran isn't just another country. Iran is basically sitting on one of the biggest energy jackpots on the entire planet. Third largest oil reserves in the world. Second largest natural gas reserves. That alone would already make it important. But then there's geography. Iran sits right next to the Strait of Hormuz, one of the most important oil choke points on Earth. About 20% of global oil shipments pass through that narrow stretch of water. So let me translate that into normal human language. If someone could control Iran, they'd basically be sitting at the master control panel of the global energy system. That's not just money, that's power. Now here's the funny part. If Iran is such a huge prize, why aren't the rest of us hopping on a plane and going to take it ourselves? Is it because the plane tickets are too expensive? No. It's because most countries don't have the military hardware to even think about pulling that off. But the United States? Well, the US actually does. And more importantly, it still controls something even more powerful, the global financial system. For decades, the backbone of American global power has been the US dollar dominating oil trade. At one point, almost 90% of global oil transactions were settled in dollars. But recently, that number has been slipping. Last year it dropped to about 65%. And in just 1 year alone, it fell 9 percentage points. Now, if you're an economist, that's not just a statistic. That's a flashing red alarm light. At this pace, the entire system could start falling apart within a few years. And that's when Washington starts to panic. First you saw pressure ramping up against Nicolas Maduro down in Venezuela. And now the focus has shifted squarely onto Iran. For a long time, a lot of people thought the United States was just bluffing. Aircraft carriers moving around, bombers flying overhead, a lot of tough talk. But then suddenly, Washington dove into the situation like an Olympic diver attempting some crazy high-difficulty move. A full spin, knees tucked, straight into the water. Splash! Now they're in the pool, whether they like it or not. But here's the twist. If you were going to pick a moment to challenge Iran, this might actually look like the perfect time. Iran's economy is under serious strain. Inflation has been brutal. Right now, about $100 can exchange for roughly 130 million Iranian rials. Back in 2000, $1 bought about 30 rials. That tells you everything you need to know about the pressure the country has been under. Sanctions, economic isolation, regional conflicts. The system has been stretched to its limits. People were already protesting in the streets before any war even started. So, from Washington's point of view, the calculation might be this. Maybe Iran's system is fragile enough that one good push could knock it over. Just like what happened to the monarchy of Mohammad Reza Pahlavi during the Iranian Revolution. But the internal situation is even more complicated. Iran's political landscape right now looks deeply divided. Different factions pulling in different directions. Some groups even leaning toward the West. Meanwhile, several regional allies once connected to Tehran's so-called resistance network have been weakened after years of confrontation with Israel. In other words, from Washington's perspective, Iran might look like a target that's more vulnerable than it used to be. And if the United States moves quickly and applies pressure at the right moment, maybe the whole structure could start collapsing. But here's another factor. Iran usually has a powerful partner standing behind it, Russia. However, Moscow is currently heavily occupied with the ongoing conflict in Ukraine stemming from the Russian invasion of Ukraine, which means Russia may not have the bandwidth to fully support Iran if a crisis escalates. Put all those elements together, economic pressure, internal divisions, weakened regional allies, and distracted partners, and suddenly you can see why some people in Washington might think this is the moment, a rare window of opportunity. But personally, I never believed the United States would actually risk everything it has built in the Middle East over the past several decades just to fight Iran directly. Yet, somehow, here we are. And once the United States stepped into the situation, something else immediately became clear. The entire strategic logic behind America's military presence across the Middle East started to look a little shaky. For years, the idea was simple. If your country hosted an American military base, nobody would dare mess with you. That was the security guarantee. But now, the situation suddenly feels different. Because in this environment, being too closely aligned with Washington might actually make you a target instead of a shield. For decades, the United States walked through the region like a giant bear scaring away wolves. But sometimes, the guy wearing the bear costume runs into a real hunter. And when that happens, the whole forest starts watching very carefully to see what happens next. 我是大连不聊骚的御姐，我们下期视频再见。